Running back position, Audric Estime was a workhorse. So the two guys that follow him on the depth chart are obviously guys that are not new to meaningful snaps, carries against good opponents, anything like that. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, are they ready to fill in such a way that the running back room doesn't take a step back?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to take a step back. It's going to look different, right? I mean, Audric's a completely different type of runner than what Jeremiah and Jadarian are. So it's going to look very different. As I expect it to look a lot more like 2022 Mark than last year, where last year Audric was the guy, whereas in 2022, 1 week it was Audric, 1 week it was Logan Diggs, and they would kind of go back and forth and kind of be 1A, 1B. I think we'll see a little bit more of that this year, with Jeremiah Love being sort of the starter and then Jadarian Price being that guy that plays a ton. And just like we saw in the bowl game, you ride the hot hand, right? Jadarian was feeling it that game. So they rode him in the second half and he runs for 100 yards, even though Jeremiah Love started the game at running back. Very different players, more explosive, not as big, not the workhorses that Audric was, but they bring more playmaking ability to the table. And I also think you're going to see the pass game be a bigger part of how they use the running backs this year. I think you're going to see Jeremiah and Jadarian both catch the ball more. Jadarian in more of the traditional running back ways, screens, angles, slides, wheels. Jeremiah is the guy that can literally line up outside and do a lot of different things in sort of a receiver type of look, even though he's not a pure receiver, which then gives Notre Dame the opportunity, if they so choose, and I think that they will at times, to put them both on the field at the same time and be able to go at defenses that way. So it's going to be a much different look. I don't think either of them are going to replace Audric's production. I mean, 1,341 yards and 18 touchdowns. That's pretty good. That's a lot of production. But I think as a combination, I think they're going to be very, very productive players and give Notre Dame some legitimate home run ability out of the backfield. And they have the added benefit of they've got Riley Leonard at quarterback. I mean, you watch games last year, Ohio State did this, Mark, where they would just crash the backside whenever Audric was getting the ball because there was no threat that Sam Hartman was going to pull that thing and run outside. You try crashing the backside against these guys, and you've got a quarterback that runs a sub 4.6 that's got over 1,000 career rushing yards is going to pull that sucker out and take off. And so I think that's going to help the backs as well, which is something that Audric didn't have last year.
Brian Driscoll breaking down Notre Dame football for us because that's what he does. It's Irish Breakdown, but he does it every day there. So please join him and the rest of the crew there. It is worth the watch and the listen, folks. Irish Breakdown. All right. I apologize for this, Brian, because I have not done my due diligence on Notre Dame information like I should. But I'm a little bit behind on my typical summer studies of all the football teams. So maybe I'm leaning back on as people that probably wander into your chats and into your comment section that know what they know about Notre Dame football, and it might be dated information or just those old storylines that you tend to lean on concerning certain programs. So at the wide receiver position, of course, one of your guys went to Cal, one of your guys went to Virginia, Chris Tyree. What's left there now? Based on some of your previous comments, it sounds like you're good at wide receiver and you feel good about this group.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, this is a much more experienced group than it was last year. I mean, and I'm not sitting there saying like, oh, they're better off with Chris Tyree at UVA and Rico's at UCLA and Tobias as a Cal. I'm not saying that it's good that those players are gone. It's more focusing on what's arrived now. And when you look at what Notre Dame has now, they added Chris Mitchell from Florida International, who had over 60 catches, over 1,100 yards last year. Also went on the road. You say, okay, well, he did this against, G5 schools. Okay, well, they went and played Arkansas on the road in November last year, and he had 6 catches for 157 yards, right? So this is a kid that's a playmaker. You've got Bo Collins, former top 100 recruit, has over 1,000 career receiving yards at Clemson. A lot of teams Notre Dame's going to play this year, Bo's already squared off against. You know what he can do. And honestly, there wasn't a receiver last year that gave Benjamin Morrison more fits than what Bo Collins did. And it's interesting because 3 of their bigger pickups this season were guys that actually gave Notre Dame problems last year. You look at Riley Leonard and what he did to Notre Dame. Joe Wald only gave up 1 sack last year. It was to RJ Oben, who's now at defensive end for Notre Dame. And then Bo Collins, his numbers won't blow you away in that game because the quarterback, but he gave Notre Dame fits on the perimeter. And so they went out and got those guys. And then you add them to the mix with Jaden Harrison, who was a first-team All-American kick returner last year from Marshall, brings a lot of speed. Plus now you've got Jaden Greathouse, who was the probably their best young player in the first half of the year. Then he got banged up, and then Jordan Faison steps in. He was their best young player in the second half of the season. They're both back, and Jaden Thomas is back healthy. So there's a lot more depth this year, Mark, than there was last year. There's a ton more experience than they had last year. I think I did something in some math where, Chris Tyree had about 480 yards, and Rico was over 300, and Tobias was over 200. But you go look at their production, and the guys that they're bringing in were way more productive. Almost twice as many yards, almost over twice as many catches and touchdowns as a group last year than the group that they lost. And so, I mean, it's just a different group. And the other thing is, last year, most of the players outside of Tobias, most of the guys were ideally suited to play the slot. Chris Mitchell's an outside guy. Bo Collins is an outside guy. Jane Thomas is back. He's healthy. He missed half the year last year. Or he didn't miss half the year, but he was banged up half the year. So he couldn't get open. He couldn't run. So you have a more diverse group of players this year, more speed on the outside this year, where last year your fastest guy was in the slot. It's just a completely different makeup this year at the receiving corps. Now, can they play as one group? Can they do what they did at other places at Notre Dame? That remains to be seen. But talent-wise, it's impressive. And you watch them play, you're like, yeah, they're going to be okay. And they're being challenged every day by one of the best secondaries in college football.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Folks, please like the video and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. And, of course, it's Irish Breakdown with Brian.